Welcome to our StableNet Snapshot webinar. My name is Titus Doser. I'm part of the InfoSim research and the development department, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to present our StableNet template editor to you in the next roughly 16.5 minutes. Let me start in a very general way as an orientation. As you might know, StableNet has a huge amount of functions and offers a lot of interfaces you can use for your own specific use cases. You can define plenty of jobs and measurements, jobs for configurations, for discovering your network, for automatizing workflows, and so on and so forth. So StableNet almost allows you to do whatever you want, but of course you have to tell StableNet in some way what you want to do. And that is where templates come into play. With XML templates, you can configure, roughly speaking, what your job or measurement shall do, how it shall work. But working with these templates used to be a bit complicated. When I started at InfoSim a year ago, I had to create some templates, and my workflow was as follows. First, I searched some existing template to start with, exported it from the StableNet Java GUI, opened the template file in my IDE or some editor. Then I sometimes had validation issues. That's of course not StableNet's fault, but still annoying. So you know probably the XML templates have to follow a schema that we have defined, and you can validate it, and this didn't work immediately sometimes. And then I repeatedly executed the following steps. I looked up several things in the documentation, sometimes also in the XML schema, edit the template, add it over the StableNet Java GUI and test it. And when something is still wrong, start in the beginning again. So summing up, you need to permanently switch between at least 3 tools: an editor, the StableNet Java GUI, and the browser for the documentation portal. And additionally, you might have some problems regarding validation and have to search huge XML schemas. And the good news that I have is, with the template editor, you have everything you need in one place. And this saves a lot of time and reduces error proneness. And now let me show you the functionality of the editor. First of all, you can find it in the StableNet web portal and under Management Templates Editor. Here you can filter by the type of the template. As you can see here, we support quite a lot of different template types. Currently, you only see the external templates, and you can search templates here. Now I'm going to walk through this row of buttons, but not in the order you see it here. And doing that, I will present you the features that we have. First of all, of course, you can add a new template, for example, Discovery XML template. Let's simply call it test. And when you open it, you can see you're already given a valid XML file, a valid discovery template. And you also see that we have syntax highlighting, corresponding tags, opening and closing are highlighted as well. And you can collapse tags and expand them as well. Then, of course, once you have changed something, you can save the template, save it with a different name or a different version. And of course, you can also delete the template. So this was a very basic functionality that you probably would all have expected. But I'm moving to the more advanced features now and switch to another template. And this is now an external template. And for the next features, I need to say some words about life cycles. As you can see, some templates have this wrench icon here. The reason is that in their root tag, they have an attribute lifecycle, and this attribute has the value testing. The lifecycle attribute can either have the value testing or production. And that means by default, wherever a given template is used, so for example, the LoRaWAN general sensor parameters template, wherever it is used, StableNet will use by default the most recent version, which is in production state. This one is in testing state. So here, obviously, version 5 is everywhere used everywhere. And therefore, when you want to modify a productive template, you should always be working in template state. Then you can create arbitrarily many new versions, and this will not change anything regarding your measurements that you have for your jobs in case of other template types, until you release some template version, which you can do here with this button. But of course, you should only do that when you have a version you're satisfied with. And the good thing is also the editor supports you in having the correct workflow. So when I take some productive template, the latest, I changed something. For example, I remove this tag and click Save. Sorry, I did not remove the correct lines. Please, now I can save it. You see the template itself, which was in production state, is not changed at all. But a new template is created, which is in testing state and which has the changes that I've just made. Okay, but for now, I delete it again. And we have another useful feature for you when you work with multiple versions of a template, namely the Diff Viewer. Just click on one template and open the Diff Viewer here. And then you can compare any two versions of this template, for example, version 5 and version 4, and you immediately see what has changed from version 4 to version 5. So here the version has changed, obviously, this is always the case. And the main change was that here a monitor is added, which did not exist here. And you have some ranges and some other attributes here. All right, now I turn back to discovery templates and show you some more features. Let's first have a quick look at some CSV file. When you work with discoveries, you often use CSV files because you specify the devices that you want to discover in a CSV file. And you have the opportunity to look at the CSV file in this beautiful table and even can change values within this table. So that's a nice feature. And now let's go back to the XML file. XML files and XML discoveries are quite complex. You have a huge number of properties that you can set. For example, here we have 87. And in order to make it a bit easier for you, we have created some GUI that you can use, so you don't have to work through the properties in a text-based way like here, but you can just enable certain properties here, and just like we did in the CSV file, we can also add the values here in the table as well. That is called the property editor. Now, when you work with templates, it will probably happen quite often that you get a malformed XML file like I am getting here. The indentations are wrong now. This is no problem for the editor. It's just one click and you have it back in perfect form, a perfectly well-formed XML file with good indentations, always 2 spaces. So that's fine. And what you can also do, you can validate. I mentioned that before. You can disable the auto validation and then validate manually here. So let's say we make some mistake here. For example, we don't remember here that it must be singular. Add an S. This is a bit longer template. I scroll up, and if I validate now, the error is found. And here I get a precise explanation what the error is. So the closing tag was expected to be device, but was devices. And if you click here, you directly jump to the line where the problem occurs. And you can fix it, validate it again, and you see there are no problems anymore. Okay, the next features I'm going to introduce to you are the auto hinting and the Xsd browser. First, the auto hinting, you can disable it here if it bothers you, but believe me, you won't use the disable button very often because auto hinting is a very useful thing. Let's say, for example, let's at first collapse this tag. Let's say, for example, you want to add some measurement for each device that you discover. For example, some TCP connect measurement, which regularly tests whether certain ports are open or not. Before we have this editor, I would now have to search the docs to look up where I can add the corresponding tag, what is the tag's precise name, what are the attributes allowed, and which attributes are mandatory, and which children tags can I add, and so on and so forth. And in more involved cases, I would even need to look things up in the XML schema, which is often time consuming and probably not all our users can read or understand XML schemas. And the template editor indeed makes this very easy. So if I want to add a measurement for every device, it makes perfectly sense that it must be inside of this device tag. And if I start typing now, I get, I'm suggested all tags that can be used right now according to the schema. And if I continue typing, I see, well, this is the correct tag name. I use it, and the editor immediately adds the port attribute, which is mandatory. It makes sense. If I want to measure whether a port is open, I have to specify that port, of course. Let's say, for example, 22. So let's see whether the device has maybe has an SSH server running. And the template editor can not only suggest tags, but also other attributes. If I continue here, I'm suggested all attributes that are possible at that certain place. And also the values of attributes are suggested in case only a fixed set of attribute values are possible. For example, here, if I start typing U, then I'll get these suggestions and can select one. And now I can continue and say, well, maybe we want to add some tags for these measurements. And here we see tag import, and we have the mandatory tag category attribute. Let's call it, for example, measurement. Let's select, for example, category measurement category 0. It's just to put it at the just for some order in the tree that I will use. I add the value, maybe TCP connect, and now I can easily add some more measurements. For example, port 80 is maybe interesting, and so on. I think this is a really great feature. But if you don't even have a rough idea of what you want, the Xsd browser might help you even better. When I open it, it shows me the root tag of the current template type, which in this case is discover, and allows me to browse through the XML schema. So I can see here all child elements of discover. Let's have, for example, a look at the device element. We get some basic information here, get the information whether this tag is required or not, and whether the tag may have content or not. And you see all the children here and all attributes, and they are all clickable. So by clicking on, for example, the attribute discover, I directly jump to the jump in the tree to the discover attribute and get the information what this attribute does. Namely, it specifies whether you only update existing StableNet inventory devices, or if you also discover other devices. And again, you have similar information here, the type, whether it's required or not, and which type the value has. So here it's a string. And what is also possible is you can search certain tags. For example, let's say we want to know about external measurements. Where can we use them? Then you see some attributes here which in whose names the string external occurs, but here we have some templates, some elements, and you see the external tag can be used at several places. In the XML file, for example, directly as a child of the root tag, there I can add external measurements and you get similar information as you did get for the device element. One last thing I want to mention now about the editor is you also have shortcuts, which is quite useful, obviously. Those of you who are familiar with working with editors will use these shortcuts probably quite often. One shortcut that I want to particularly highlight is the one for the Xsd browser, because the shortcut can indeed do more than clicking on the button. For example, let's put the cursor at some attribute. And if I use the shortcut now, the browser opens directly with the attribute that my cursor pointed at. Okay, this is all I want to say directly to about the template editor, but I want to introduce one more feature to you. And these are guided tours. You find them here. And we want to add many more of these tours. And the tours are another way of getting documentation directly into the portal itself. I've already explained that the editor contains a lot of documentation for templates, but the guided tours add information on how to use the editor itself. For example, how to create a new template. So we can click here, template creation. And you see it shows the normal GUI, but disables everything currently not needed and gives useful information. So I'm always told what to do now. And get some useful information, for example, which template versions I can use. I don't have to start with one. I can start with a higher number. Wouldn't have known that. And can click through that. And finally create a template, which I can do right now because I haven't given it a name. So let's cancel the tour here. But I see two main advantages of these tours. First of all, you don't need to switch to another browser tab for the docs portal. And secondly, I think getting the docs directly in place makes them easier to understand and to apply in your own use case. So now I'm optimistic that you're convinced that the template editor indeed is a great feature, but you can easily make it an even greater feature. Simply use it. Obviously, we can build what we think is the greatest feature ever, but if no one uses it, it makes StableNet not better, but worse. The template editor is already used by many people, otherwise I would not have called it great, of course, but if it is used by even more people, it becomes an even greater feature. So in that sense, please contribute in making the editor an even greater feature. And I'm convinced that you will make the same experience that I made when I started using the editor a couple of months ago. It makes things so much easier. Thank you.